There are interviews that make you laugh. There are interviews that leave you in awe. And then, there are interviews that rip the ground out from underneath the world. That's what happened just days ago on Late Night with Seth Meyers, when Pete Davidson, known more for his tattoos and troubled romances than royal entanglements, looked dead into the camera and casually said something no one on earth was ready to hear. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a skit. And the moment was so raw, so unscripted, so jaw-droppingly personal, that even the studio audience didn't know how to react. Seth Meyers' grin twitched into confusion. Pete scratched his cheek, as if second-guessing his own words. But they were out there now, and the world was watching. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Yeah, Pete said, blinking. We were close. Meghan and I don't know if I should say this. But it was while she was already with Harry. The audience went silent. Some laughed, thinking it was a punchline. It wasn't. Seth sat back in his chair, stunned. There was a visible pause, almost like time itself was recalibrating around the implications of what had just been said. Was Pete Davidson seriously claiming he had an intimate relationship with Meghan Markle while she was married to Prince Harry? In less than 60 seconds, the world was in flames. Twitter imploded. Royal commentators scrambled for explanations. The palace refused to comment. And Pete, for once in his life, wasn't joking. At least, that's what it looked like. His tone was steady, not playful. His eyes didn't dodge. This wasn't a man fishing for laughs. This was a man who had held a secret for too long and had just let it slip on national television. But why now? Why would Pete Davidson, out of nowhere, reveal such a controversial and deeply personal truth on live TV? The answers are buried in the years leading up to that night, and they're tangled in everything from Meghan's days in Hollywood, her rise to royalty, Pete's meteoric fame, and a string of late-night encounters that were hidden from public view. Until now. This isn't just a scandal. It's a grenade lobbed at the heart of the British monarchy, a revelation that threatens to shatter what little trust remained between Prince Harry, the woman he gave up everything for, and a public already worn thin by royal controversy. So what really happened? To understand that, we have to start long before the interview. Before the world knew Meghan Markle as the Duchess of Sussex. Before she was posing on Time magazine covers or launching multi-million-dollar foundations. We have to go back to the glittering parties of Los Angeles, the chaotic energy of SNL after-parties, and the electric buzz of two rising stars drawn to each other under neon lights and whispered promises. Sources close to Pete say it wasn't just a fling. It wasn't meaningless. And it wasn't over before Meghan said, "I do," to Prince Harry. If what Pete claims is true, this wasn't just a dalliance. It was an overlapping, emotionally charged secret relationship that could rewrite everything we thought we knew about Meghan's journey into the royal family. The backlash was immediate. Within hours, tabloids across the globe exploded with headlines. Meghan's secret affair exposed. Pete drops royal bombshell. Did Prince Harry know? The Sun, The Mirror, TMZ, Page 6, they all flooded the internet with coverage. And while some called Pete's confession a desperate publicity stunt, others weren't so sure. Because when you look back, when you piece together the clues, the timelines, the public sightings, the strange disappearances, and the cryptic comments Pete has made in past interviews, the pieces start to form a picture. And that picture is anything but innocent. Imagine being Prince Harry, already exiled from the only life you knew, living in California with a wife who's constantly under scrutiny. Your relationship, already strained under the weight of public judgment and family betrayal. And then you hear this, that a man like Pete Davidson, known for dating high-profile women, is now claiming he was intimate with your wife. Not years ago, not before the engagement, but while you were married. How does a person recover from that? The truth is, no one knows where Harry is right now. Insiders say he canceled a scheduled appearance the very next day. Meghan was reportedly seen entering a private residence alone, dressed in all black, surrounded by her personal security. A source close to the couple claims that Harry is emotionally shattered and is not currently in communication with anyone outside his therapist and one close friend. And Pete hasn't walked it back. If anything, he's doubled down. When asked backstage after the taping if he'd like to clarify his comments, Pete smirked and said, "It is what it is, man. The truth always comes out, right? For some, that line felt like a dagger. For others, it was a reckoning. But whether you believe Pete or not, whether you think Meghan could actually do something like this, the fact remains, something big just cracked open. And if what comes out next is even half as shocking as this interview, then the world hasn't seen the end of this story, not by a long shot. But let's pause for a moment and ask the real question. Why Pete? Why would Meghan, already on the cusp of marrying a British royal, get involved, emotionally or otherwise, with Pete Davidson of all people? Because this isn't about attraction. It's not even about sex. This is about power, insecurity, and a need for control. For years, Pete has been Hollywood's unlikely Casanova. From Ariana Grande to Kim Kardashian, he's been with some of the most powerful and sought-after women in the industry. He's the wild card, the chaos agent, the guy who always seems to be in the right place at the wrong time, or the wrong place at the right time. Either way, he's not someone you forget. And Meghan? She was always ambitious, always strategic. From deal or no deal to suits to Buckingham Palace, she climbed fast. Some say too fast. And people like Pete? People who move in the shadows of comedy clubs and after-hours hotel lounges? They were part of that world, the world Meghan had to pass through to get to the palace gates. If their paths crossed, and if there was more than just passing flirtation, it raises questions the palace never wanted asked. What did Harry know? When did he know it? Was Meghan honest from the beginning? Or was Pete a buried secret that only came to light now, because Pete wanted it to? There's also the question of timing. Why reveal this now? Pete is no stranger to the media. He understands the power of publicity. But sources say this wasn't a planned bit. It wasn't pre-cleared with producers. It was spontaneous and deadly serious, which makes it even more terrifying for Meghan. Because if there's more to the story, more messages, more photos, more proof, then the leak has only just begun. And the monarchy? Already weakened by years of scandal, by Prince Andrew's disgrace, Harry and Meghan's Oprah revelations, and the loss of Queen Elizabeth, may be on the brink of an image crisis it cannot repair. But here's the thing. We don't know the full truth yet. What we do know is that the public is divided. Some fans defend Meghan, claiming Pete is lying for attention. Others are digging through old footage, social media posts, and suspicious gaps in Meghan's timeline, hoping to find more evidence. And Harry? He's silent. His absence is louder than any denial. As we begin this journey into the twisted layers of this scandal, one thing is certain. This story isn't just about a comedian and a duchess. It's about betrayal. It's about timing. It's about what happens when the world's most carefully curated love story collides with a chaotic truth that refuses to stay hidden. And by the time we reach the end of it all, the question won't just be whether Meghan and Pete were really involved. It'll be something far more heartbreaking. How much of Harry's world was real, and how much was just a beautiful illusion? It started as any other segment. The lights, the laughter, the signature smirk of Seth Meyers easing into the rhythm of yet another night of late talk show banter. The audience was warmed up. The mood was light. Pete Davidson, the evening's guest, strolled onto the stage with his usual blend of charm and chaos. Dressed in his typical laid-back style, oversized hoodie, baseball cap, worn sneakers. He looked more like someone who wandered in from a Brooklyn bodega than a multi-million-dollar celebrity. But that was Pete. That's always been Pete. No one in that studio, not even Seth himself, could have predicted what was about to happen. There was no warning, no change in lighting, no ominous music. Just a few jokes, a couple laughs about his recent projects, a mention of his new stand-up special, and then the entire tone of the evening shifted. Seth asked a seemingly innocent question. You've dated some pretty high-profile women, Pete. Ever worry about running into one of their husbands? Pete laughed, but not his usual laugh. It was shorter, sharper. Then, with a slight shrug, he leaned forward and replied, I mean, yeah, but that already happened. Meghan's husband didn't even know at the time. A beat of silence passed. The studio froze. Was this part of a bit? Was this a joke gone off script? Seth's eyes darted toward the camera crew, searching for confirmation. None came. The audience laughed, but it was nervous laughter. Confused. Uneasy. Pete wasn't smirking. He wasn't chuckling. He looked away, blinked a few times, then clarified. Look, I probably shouldn't say this. But yeah, Meghan Markle and I were close. Real close. It was a while back. But yeah, she was already with Harry. It landed like a bomb. Seth's lips parted, like he was about to say something. Maybe a joke to steer the conversation back to safer territory, but nothing came out. For the first time in recent memory, Seth Meyers, the master of late-night timing, was speechless. Backstage, the production team was in chaos. Earpieces buzzed. Producers mouthed frantic directions. Should they cut to commercial? Was Pete having a breakdown? Or worse, was he telling the truth? The moment played out in real time. The audience didn't cheer. They didn't boo. They just watched. Eyes wide, breaths held. It was no longer entertainment. It was something raw, dangerous, and impossibly real. Pete leaned back in his chair. No smile. No punchline. Just silence. Seth, to his credit, tried to recover. He chuckled awkwardly, reached for his cue cards, and muttered, "Well, that took a turn." But the tension was already spiraling. Pete added, almost like an afterthought, "She's cool, though. No hard feelings." Cool. That word alone reignited the firestorm. Social media erupted within seconds. The clip was sliced, shared, and reshared at lightning speed. Millions viewed it before the show had even finished airing in all time zones. Hashtags like hashtag Pete and Meghan, hashtag Davidson bombshell, and hashtag royal affair flooded every trending list on Twitter and TikTok. The initial reaction was confusion, then disbelief, then a quiet, rising panic, especially among royal loyalists. What had Pete just confessed to? Was this true? Could this be real? At first, it seemed too outrageous to believe. After all, Pete Davidson was a comedian. He said wild things all the time. But the way he said it, the tone, the delivery, it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like a release. Like someone finally dropping a truth they'd carried for far too long. Behind the scenes, the show's PR team went into overdrive. Producers contacted Pete's management. NBC's legal department began crafting statements. There were whispers that the segment would be pulled from streaming. By the next morning, it was confirmed. NBC had removed the interview clip from their YouTube channel and official streaming platforms. But it was far too late. The internet doesn't forget. Hundreds of fan-recorded clips had already gone viral. The story was out. And the damage? It was just beginning. Within hours, royal insiders began leaking information. One unnamed palace aide told a London tabloid that Prince Harry went white as a ghost when he was shown the clip. Another claimed Meghan locked herself in a private room for hours and refused to answer calls from anyone, including her publicist. Yet another said Archie and Lilibet were hurried out of the house by a nanny while a shouting match erupted behind closed doors. It all sounded like a scripted drama, but it wasn't. This was real life. This was the royal family, once again, caught in a storm of scandal. The media descended like vultures. Every outlet, from gossip sites to mainstream news, wanted in. CNN ran a segment titled Pete Davidson's Royal Bombshell. Fact or fiction? BBC's morning show featured a heated panel debate on whether this spelled the final fracture in Meghan and Harry's already fragile public image. Piers Morgan tweeted 6 times in 3 hours, each post dripping with the kind of vindication he's been waiting years to express. And then, just when the world thought things couldn't spiral further, Pete did it again. He posted an Instagram story, just one slide. It read, "I never lie. That's all I'll say. Good night." With it was a black and white photo of a hotel hallway, dated April 2017. No faces. No context. Just a blurred image, time-stamped and cryptic. Speculation exploded. Was this where it happened? Was Meghan there that night? People began dissecting the image like it was a crime scene. The pattern of the carpet, the door numbers, the security camera placement. Reddit threads were launched. Hotel staff were allegedly contacted. Someone even claimed to have recognized the wallpaper pattern from a luxury suite in Beverly Hills. This wasn't just celebrity gossip anymore. This was an investigation. Meanwhile, Meghan stayed silent. Her team released no statement. Her social media accounts remained untouched. No denial. No clarification. No rebuttal. That silence became louder than words. In the vacuum, voices filled the space. Meghan's critics demanded answers. Her supporters rushed to her defense, claiming Pete was weaponizing his mental health history for attention. Mental health advocates cautioned the media not to push too far. But the damage had been done. Prince Harry, usually quick to defend his wife, said nothing. Not a post, not a statement, not a whisper, which only deepened the suspicion that something in Pete's words had hit close to home. Something he and Meghan may have hoped was buried had now resurfaced. But perhaps the most chilling detail of all came not from Pete, nor from Meghan, nor from Harry, but from an anonymous former SNL writer. In a now-deleted tweet, the writer said, "We all knew. Everyone knew. Pete tried to talk about it back then, but his team shut it down. The truth always finds a way." Whether that tweet was authentic or not, it fanned the flames of belief that this wasn't just a careless outburst. It was a truth long suppressed. And for those watching, those truly paying attention, one thing was clear: this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a public unraveling, of trust, of image, of carefully constructed royal narrative. This interview, in just a matter of minutes, had lit a fuse under the monarchy, under Meghan and Harry's private life, and under a truth that had been kept in the shadows for far too long. And Pete Davidson? He walked off that stage with the same swagger he walked in with. No apologies, no clarifications, just one final nod to the audience, as if to say, "You heard me. Do what you want with it." It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a publicity stunt. It was a confession. And the ripples of that confession were only just beginning to reach the shore. Before she was a duchess, before she wore Givenchy at Windsor Castle, before the world dissected every gesture she made beside Prince Harry, Meghan Markle was just another ambitious actress trying to survive in a city built on illusion. Long before the crown, there was casting calls. Long before royal duties, there were late-night scripts, auditions, networking mixers, and the quiet desperation of being seen in a town that only remembered the last name on the marquee. Meghan's Hollywood journey didn't start with Suits. That's where it got interesting. But before that, she was a struggling performer juggling bit parts and suitcase dreams. Some remember her from Deal or No Deal, standing silently as a briefcase girl, smiling through heels and long hours. To some, that moment symbolized humility. To others, it was a strategic move. Exposure is currency in Los Angeles, and she was banking every ounce of it. Behind the surface, Meghan was more than just another actress. She was educated, eloquent, and hyper-aware of optics. She didn't party hard. She didn't spiral like so many others around her. Her image, even then, was carefully curated, approachable but classy, trendy but intelligent. But in the entertainment world, image is only half the game. The rest? Relationships. And not just romantic ones. Connections, the kind forged at exclusive rooftop bars, charity galas, or midnight after-parties in the hills. It was within this world, according to several insiders, that Meghan and Pete Davidson's paths first crossed. They weren't introduced on set. It wasn't a red carpet affair. It happened, reportedly, at a private birthday party hosted by an unnamed HBO executive in 2016. The guest list was a strange mixture of high-fashion, late-night comedians, indie directors, and rising TV stars. Meghan wasn't yet royalty, but she had enough buzz from her legal drama role to get an invite. Pete was already making headlines for his raw SNL appearances and publicized relationship with Ariana Grande. They didn't meet through managers or agents. It was more accidental. A shared laugh over bad tequila. A joke about Hollywood weirdos. And something clicked. According to an anonymous partygoer, they were instantly locked in. Not in a "we're about to hook up" kind of way, more like they just got each other. He made her laugh, and she leaned into that. He's not the kind of guy she would have been seen with publicly. But that night, it didn't matter. That description may sound like just another Hollywood fling beginning. But it wasn't just that. The source added that Meghan and Pete disappeared from the party for over an hour, then returned with flushed cheeks and knowing grins. Most dismissed it. After all, celebrities connect at parties all the time. What mattered in Hollywood was whether the cameras caught it. But no camera caught them that night. No TMZ alert. No grainy snapshots. It was as if it never happened. Except Pete remembered. And, apparently, so did Meghan. Over the next few months, sightings became more frequent. Not public ones, but insider whispers. Pete was seen entering a wellness event in Malibu Meghan attended. A barista at a discreet cafe in Venice Beach claimed they saw the two sharing a corner booth. In each case, the details were too small to matter, until now. Meghan's circle of friends at the time was notably diverse: social activists, stylists, producers, even chefs. But few ever spoke on the record about her personal life. It was as if everyone knew Meghan had a trajectory, and it was best not to interfere with its momentum. Those who did get too close or ask too many questions often found themselves cut off, diplomatically, of course. Yet behind that rising star was a woman deeply focused on social positioning. Meghan wasn't just chasing roles. She was mapping a future. And if Pete was part of that map, it makes what followed all the more complicated. Publicly, Meghan and Harry's relationship began in mid-2016. But even that timeline has fuzzy edges. The two reportedly met in July during a London event that Prince Harry attended as part of his conservation work. But in Meghan's own interviews, she admits they began dating in private before the public ever found out. By the time headlines caught on, they had been quietly seeing each other for months. So where does Pete fit? If Meghan and Pete's connection began in early 2016 and Harry arrived mid-year, there's a clear overlap. One that, until now, was buried beneath carefully crafted statements and glowing profiles. And this is where the narrative forks. Some argue Meghan was simply dating, a woman free to explore relationships until things with Harry became serious. Others, however, claimed there was more intent behind her actions, that she kept Pete around, emotionally or physically, even as she courted the idea of marrying into royalty. According to a makeup artist who worked with Meghan on a wellness shoot in early 2017, she once made a cryptic remark backstage. The artist, speaking anonymously, said, "Meghan was on her phone between shots. She laughed, looked up at me, and said, 'Sometimes I miss the chaos. But the crown is cleaner.' I didn't get it then. Now, I think she was talking about someone like Pete. The chaos. That word stuck. Pete Davidson is chaos incarnate. Unfiltered, emotionally messy, charismatic, and addictive. Meghan, on the other hand, has always been about precision. Clean lines. Clear messaging. Yet the two were drawn to each other like magnets. Opposites not repelling, but colliding. Hollywood saw them as part of different universes. Meghan was climbing the elegant ladder. Pete was building a tower out of firecrackers. But behind closed doors, their worlds blurred. And it's in those blurred lines that the truth may be hiding. Some friends of Pete's have long hinted at a mystery woman who broke his heart, one he never named. In a 2019 stand-up set, Pete joked about a woman who went on to marry the most famous redhead alive and called me a beautiful mistake. At the time, people laughed. But no one connected the dots. Now, those dots form a pattern. And that pattern suggests that Meghan's past, far from being a simple rags-to-riches story, might be more layered, more manipulative, and more emotionally charged than the world ever imagined. This isn't to vilify her. Meghan did what many have done in Hollywood. She survived. She networked. She made choices. But when those choices intersect with the British monarchy, with a man like Prince Harry, and with a loose cannon like Pete Davidson, the stakes become something else entirely. Because this isn't just about a forgotten fling. It's about trust. It's about how much of Meghan's past Prince Harry truly knew when he fell in love with her. And it's about how much she chose to tell him, and how much she chose to leave buried. If Pete's claims are true, and if this was more than a fleeting encounter, then Meghan didn't just lie by omission. She lived a double life. One foot in the palace, the other in Hollywood. One hand holding a prince, the other texting a comedian. And now, that past is catching up. Not because the media dug it up. Not because an enemy leaked it. But because Pete, for reasons only he knows, chose this moment to tell the world. Whether it was revenge, regret, or relief, he told the truth as he saw it. And now, Meghan's meticulously crafted narrative is showing cracks. This chapter of her life, the Hollywood chapter, the one she tried to leave behind, is no longer her secret. It's everyone's story now. Imagine giving up everything you've ever known, your home, your family, your birthright, all in the name of love. Imagine walking away from the most powerful institution in your life, cutting ties with the press, the crown, even your own brother. Now, imagine doing all of that for someone who, years later, might be hiding a betrayal so deep it cracks the foundation of everything you believed was sacred. That is the exact storm Prince Harry found himself in when Pete Davidson, in the span of a few unscripted minutes, suggested to the world that he had once shared an intimate relationship with Meghan Markle during her marriage to the Duke himself. For Harry, the man who once told Oprah that Meghan saved him, who declared he had finally found his home in her arms, the news wasn't just shocking. It was devastating. According to sources close to the Sussex Circle, Harry didn't immediately watch the Seth Meyers interview. It was relayed to him in fragments. A staff member tried to soften the blow, referencing Pete's sense of humor and unpredictable nature. But then someone sent Harry the clip, just 30 seconds of footage, a moment that would become frozen in time. The instant the life he built in California began to tilt off balance. What happened after that, few people truly know. But what has been confirmed is this. Harry canceled a scheduled call with the Diana Legacy Trust that same evening. His name was removed from a local California fundraiser appearance. And by dawn, paparazzi noticed increased security around the Montecito property, including vehicles coming and going that weren't part of the usual routine. Some say Harry disappeared. One tabloid claimed he took a solo trip to a secluded retreat in Big Sur, where no phones or electronics were allowed, a place previously recommended by celebrity therapists for clients in emotional crisis. Whether that's true or not, the silence surrounding Harry's response grew louder with every passing hour. For a man so fiercely protective of his wife and family, his absence spoke volumes. He did not deny the claims. He did not defend Meghan. He did not say anything at all. And for someone who had spent the last 3 years publicly shielding Meghan from scrutiny, calling out racism, accusing tabloids of smear campaigns, defending her mental health and humanity, the silence marked a dramatic shift. Privately, Harry's inner circle has begun to leak details. A longtime friend who wished to remain anonymous said Harry was shattered, not because of what Pete said, but because of what Meghan didn't say. He trusted her. He believed he knew everything. But the moment Pete opened his mouth, a seed of doubt was planted. And Harry's entire life is built on that trust. It wasn't just about whether the affair happened. It was about the fact that Meghan never mentioned it. Not during their courtship. Not during their engagement. Not after the wedding. Not even when the public began questioning the authenticity of her past relationships. This revelation, or even the possibility of it, ripped open old wounds. Harry has long battled with fear, the fear of being manipulated, of being misled. As a young boy, he watched his mother, Princess Diana, destroyed by betrayal and media frenzy. He's spoken about the trauma of losing her, the suffocating grief, and the way the royal system chewed her up. When he met Meghan, he saw Diana's fire in her. He believed, perhaps naively, that Meghan was his chance at rewriting the story, at protecting a woman from the fate his mother endured. He fought against everything, family tradition, the tabloid machine, even the Queen's advisors, to keep Meghan safe. But now, the person he fought so hard to protect may have kept secrets from him that could destroy their bond from within. Insiders claim that Harry demanded answers, that there were closed-door arguments, questions Meghan dodged or downplayed. One source said, Harry wasn't even angry at first. He was stunned, confused, like the foundation of his reality had just shifted beneath his feet. And Meghan? According to those close to her team, she denied the relationship was anything serious. She insisted Pete was exaggerating, that their connection was casual and brief, long before things with Harry turned serious. But the damage wasn't in the details. It was in the omission. Why hadn't she told Harry? Why had she let the secret sit, knowing it could one day resurface? Because Harry isn't just a husband. He's a man who burned bridges to build a new life with her. And every time the past emerges in a way he didn't expect, it feels like betrayal not only of trust, but of the sacrifices he made. This wasn't the first time Harry's faith in Meghan was tested. The Oprah interview, while cathartic, opened a Pandora's box. There were debates about the accuracy of their claims, about Meghan's account of royal conversations, even about Archie's skin tone being a source of concern within the family. And yet, Harry stood by her. But now, standing by her means accepting that she may have concealed something deeply personal, something that allowed another man, a man as publicly unfiltered as Pete Davidson, to claim a piece of her heart. To many outsiders, it may seem trivial. Hollywood relationships blur timelines. People move on. But for Harry, it's different. This isn't just about jealousy. It's about the collapse of the one thing he built from scratch, a life outside the crown, a life where he and Meghan were the architects of their truth. Pete's words didn't just challenge Meghan's loyalty. They challenged Harry's judgment. And for a man whose entire journey was built on the idea that love was worth the cost, the implication that he may not have known the whole story is soul-shattering. Those closest to the Sussexes have noted that Harry has become increasingly reclusive since the revelation. He's withdrawn from some of the Archewell public affairs, opting instead for private meetings and solo reflections. There are rumors he's been in close contact with a therapist recommended by mutual friends of Elton John, another ally who once helped him process grief. But this grief is different. It's not just about a broken heart. It's about the fear that everything he believed about his wife, about his choice to build a new legacy, might have been based on an incomplete picture. And that fear is paralyzing. Because what does Harry do now? Does he confront Pete publicly? Issue a statement? Ask Meghan for a detailed timeline? Or does he let it go, bury the doubt, and continue the narrative they've fought so hard to control? Some say he's choosing the latter, for now. A close friend claimed, Harry is trying to keep the family together. But he's not okay. He's questioning everything. The question the world now asks is whether Pete Davidson's revelation was just a passing scandal, a moment of comedic chaos, or the beginning of the end for the Sussex fairy tale. Because in the quiet halls of their Montecito mansion, beyond the camera lenses and curated Instagram posts, sits a man who gave up a crown for a dream. A man now staring at the cracks forming in the foundation of that dream, wondering if he was the only one who didn't see it coming. It is said that truth leaves breadcrumbs, and when scattered across time, those fragments begin to draw a map, one that even the best PR machines cannot erase. In the case of Meghan Markle, Pete Davidson, and Prince Harry, that map begins with one deceptively simple question. When? When did Meghan and Pete actually meet? When did her relationship with Harry begin? When, if ever, did those two chapters in her life overlap? The timeline, as told by royal biographers, Hollywood insiders, and even Meghan herself, has always been curated for simplicity. Meghan met Prince Harry in July 2016 during a visit to London. The pair allegedly went on a blind date, arranged by a mutual friend. The chemistry, as they both have recounted, was instant. They began seeing each other privately, away from the press. By November, Kensington Palace confirmed they were dating. Simple, clean, romantic. But what happens when you begin pulling at the threads? That's what online sleuths, independent journalists, and industry whistleblowers have begun doing since Pete Davidson dropped his late-night confession. Within hours of his explosive statement, researchers began piecing together archived social media posts, news clips, podcast appearances, and celebrity sightings to reconstruct Meghan's timeline in 2016, and what they found raised eyebrows across both continents. Let's begin with March 2016. In that month, Meghan attended a charity gala in Los Angeles hosted by a mutual friend of Pete Davidson, a comedian-turned-podcast host who has appeared in several SNL-adjacent circles. That event, curiously, was not heavily photographed. Meghan posted a vague Instagram story featuring string lights and a champagne glass, but didn't tag the location. Pete, meanwhile, was also in Los Angeles that same weekend, wrapping a series of meetings at Comedy Central and reportedly attending the same private after-party. 2 weeks later, Meghan traveled to New York for a wellness panel and was spotted at the Greenwich Hotel, where Pete Davidson was also seen, according to a doorman who later posted about the weirdest random celeb mix of the week on his now-deleted Twitter account. Coincidence? Possibly. But then comes the smoking gun, a leaked private guest list from a rooftop birthday event in April 2016, hosted by a rising indie film director. Meghan's name is on that list. So is Pete's. So are two other people who have since declined to comment when contacted by journalists. At that party, according to a barback who worked the event, Meghan and Pete were glued together. He said they talked for hours in a quiet corner, laughing, touching, whispering. They left separately, but not before exchanging numbers in plain view of several guests. This alone doesn't confirm anything. But when plotted against Meghan's royal timeline, the cracks begin to show. Because by July of that year, she was supposedly dating Prince Harry, quietly, but seriously. Royal biographers claim that Meghan and Harry went on several dates in London over the summer. A trip to Botswana in August 2016 is often referenced as the moment their love solidified. Yet Meghan's calendar around that time tells a different story. In July, she posted on social media from Toronto, where she filmed Suits. But curiously, she also posted, and quickly deleted, a beach photo tagged in California, leading fans to wonder if she had been visiting someone. Pete Davidson, during this same time, had taken what he called a mental health break from SNL. In a podcast appearance, he mentioned spending some time away with someone who understood the pressure, a comment now being reinterpreted in a new light. Then, in early August, Meghan traveled to London, but it wasn't announced publicly until weeks later. A friend claimed it was a quiet work trip, but Meghan posted no photos and no official events were recorded. Some believe she may have seen both Pete and Harry during that period, juggling emotional relationships in two very different worlds. It's also worth noting that Meghan was invited to an exclusive VIP dinner in New York in September, hosted by a high-end skincare brand. She attended alone. Pete Davidson was also seen at that event. No photos of them together exist, but according to an attendee who shared a now-archived Facebook post, Meghan looked like she was on edge the whole time. She barely ate. Pete kept trying to make her laugh. By October, the royal buzz had begun. UK tabloids were speculating about Harry's new mystery woman. Meghan's name appeared for the first time in whispers. Paparazzi began trailing her. Yet even then, in the thick of rising royal attention, Meghan was reportedly still in communication with Pete. A text message, leaked by a former assistant of Meghan's at the time, showed her replying to someone listed as PD with the phrase, "I can't. Not now. But you know I care." The assistant, who has since disappeared from public view, claims the message was from Meghan to Pete, and it was sent just 3 days before. Pete, for his part, hinted in a 2018 comedy set about a woman who ghosted him for a red carpet prince. It was shrugged off as a joke then. Now it seems less like comedy and more like confession. The timeline grows murkier still. In early 2017, Meghan and Harry were now a public item. They were attending events, holding hands, appearing on magazine covers. Yet during that time, Meghan was seen multiple times in New York without Harry. She explained these visits as private charity meetings. But sources now say she was also visiting old friends, and possibly Pete. A hotel concierge from the Soho Grand Hotel in Manhattan claimed in an anonymous Reddit post that Meghan stayed there for 2 nights in February 2017. Pete was seen leaving that same hotel early one morning. The concierge was later fired, and the post deleted. The consistency of these sightings, these overlaps, these patterns, it all points to one possibility that grows more plausible with each detail. Meghan and Pete's relationship wasn't just in the past. It may have extended into her relationship with Harry. Maybe not as a full-blown affair. Maybe not in physical terms. But emotionally, the signs are there. One friend of Pete, speaking anonymously to a YouTube journalist, said this: "Pete didn't want to blow it up. He's not that guy." But he carried that story for years. It weighed on him. He watched Meghan become this icon, this perfect woman, and he felt like a ghost in her story, like he never existed. That messes with you. In hindsight, this is the part that cuts deepest. If Meghan did have an ongoing emotional or romantic connection with Pete Davidson, even while entering the most high-profile relationship of her life, it cast a shadow on everything that followed. Not just her love story with Harry, but the way the world viewed her, her authenticity, her integrity. Because if the timelines do overlap, and more it appears they do, then what Pete revealed on Seth Meyers wasn't a betrayal of confidence. It was a correction of history. The curated love story of Meghan and Harry has always depended on one idea: that she was whole, honest, and ready to build a life with him, free from scandal. But the timeline, when examined closely, suggests otherwise. And it leaves the world with a difficult, uncomfortable question. If Meghan wasn't fully truthful about her past, what else in the fairy tale has been rewritten? When the camera pans to a late-night host's reaction, it's often part of the choreography, the practiced smirk, the knowing glance, the chuckle that bridges awkward transitions. But on the night Pete Davidson detonated a royal bombshell with just a few words, Seth Meyers wasn't acting. His expression was caught between disbelief and dread, like a man suddenly realizing he was in the middle of a historic scandal, live on national television. As soon as Pete uttered the words, "We were close, Meghan and I," the air in the room shifted. It wasn't just the audience that fell silent, it was the host himself. For several seconds, Seth seemed to freeze. No would he come back. No redirect. His eyes widened. He leaned forward slightly, and for the first time in his polished career, he looked unprepared. That raw, unguarded moment is now being dissected across the internet like a Zapruder film. Some believe Seth was blindsided, just like the rest of us. Others are not so sure. A growing number of critics, fans, and media experts are now asking, did Seth Meyers know in advance what Pete was going to say? And if he did, why didn't he stop it? Because here's what people forget. Late-night interviews are not spontaneous affairs. They are carefully mapped out, pre-interviewed, and cleared by teams of producers, lawyers, and agents. Guests like Pete Davidson don't just sit down and start talking. There are pre-show conversations, backstage briefings, even lists of green light and red flag topics. Networks like NBC do not take risks when it comes to potential legal fallout or public controversy. So how did this happen? Was it a complete ambush? Or was something more strategic at play? Insiders at NBC have offered conflicting accounts. One low-level crew member claimed anonymously that Pete had mentioned something about airing old skeletons backstage, but didn't specify what. Another producer, speaking off the record, said that Pete had hinted to the control room that he might say something wild, but they assumed it would be another Kim Kardashian joke. What makes this even murkier is that Seth Meyers is no stranger to controversy management. A seasoned host with years of experience, he has navigated dozens of tricky moments, from political zingers to unexpected outbursts. He knows how to pivot. He knows how to protect his guests. But that night, he didn't. Instead, he froze. And in doing so, let Pete continue. That pause, that gap of inaction, is now being scrutinized as a choice. Did Seth freeze because he was shocked? Or because he realized too late that he had allowed something irreversible to be said? Media watchdogs have since torn into the moment. Journalism ethicists, legal analysts, and royal commentators are all weighing in. Some accuse Seth of negligence. Others say he should have cut to commercial the moment Pete veered off course. Still others argue that, intentionally or not, Seth gave Pete a platform to potentially defame a member of the British royal family on live television. It didn't help that Seth's production team rushed to pull the segment from official platforms the very next morning. The interview was nowhere to be found on YouTube. NBC's own website skipped over the clip entirely. It was an erasure that felt deliberate, panicked, and guilt-ridden. But the internet had already preserved it. Copies floated across Reddit, TikTok, and Telegram groups. The harder NBC tried to bury it, the more viral it became. Then came the silence. Seth didn't address the interview on social media. No public statement. No clarification. No follow-up jokes in his monologue the next evening. For a man whose job is to react to current events, the absence of commentary was deafening. People started asking hard questions. Did Seth know Pete was going to drop that truth bomb? Was the question about high-profile husbands just an innocent setup, or was it a trap disguised as a joke? Because if Seth had any inkling, even the faintest suspicion, then this wasn't just bad judgment. It was potentially a calculated ratings grab. Viewership spiked that night. The show's numbers jumped 17% over the weekly average. Clips of the moment dominated social media, generating more engagement than anything Seth had done in over a year. And while public relations teams scrambled behind the scenes, NBC reaped the benefit of attention until the backlash began. Royal aides in the UK reportedly reached out to NBC directly, expressing serious concern about the nature of the content. Legal teams allegedly reviewed Pete's comments for potential defamation. While Meghan herself did not file a complaint, several UK-based royal commentators hinted that legal consultations were underway. Meanwhile, Meghan's allies began to frame the moment as an ambush, not just of Meghan but of basic decency. They painted Pete as reckless, but they didn't spare Seth either. A strongly worded op-ed in a British tabloid accused Seth Meyers of failing to exercise even the most basic professional responsibility by allowing personal gossip to turn into international slander. A media lawyer interviewed on a U.S. morning show said, "There's a fine line between free speech and reputational damage, and late-night shows are not immune to that scrutiny. If the producers knew, even slightly, that Pete might air something like this and didn't stop him, then they're complicit." Then came the flood of speculation about Seth's personal politics, his relationship with the Sussexes, and whether he held any personal bias against Meghan. Some remembered that years earlier, Seth had participated in a comedic sketch titled Royal Love that poked fun at Meghan's entry into the royal family. At the time, it was dismissed as harmless. Now, in this new context, it resurfaced with ominous undertones. The conspiracy theories were unstoppable. Was Seth part of a larger media takedown of Meghan? Was he resentful of the couple's media control? Or, more simply, did he see an opportunity for headlines and ratings and let the moment run wild? No answers came, only more silence. By day 3 after the broadcast, #SethKnew was trending on X, formerly Twitter. Meme culture did its work. Clips of Seth's reaction were slowed down, looped, analyzed for microexpressions. People speculated about his body language, his posture, even the movement of his hands on the desk. One viral post read, "Watch the way Seth flinches. That's not surprise. That's guilt." Seth's silence continued for a full week. Then, finally, during a live segment, he offered a thin, carefully worded comment. Live TV can be unpredictable. Sometimes things are said that even we don't expect. That's the nature of having comedians as guests. I wish I could say more, but out of respect for those involved, I think it's best to move forward. The backlash only intensified. Critics called the statement vague, evasive, and cowardly. One royal pundit said, "You had a chance to clarify the facts, and instead you tiptoed around the explosion you helped ignite." Some fans defended Seth. They pointed out that he's a comedian, not a journalist, that he was just doing his job, that he was ambushed just like everyone else. But not everyone bought that, because while Seth may not have written the headline, he handed Pete the microphone. And now, whether he meant to or not, he's part of the story. A story that began as a simple interview and turned into one of the biggest pop culture scandals of the year. What happens next, whether NBC is forced to issue an apology, whether Meghan sues, whether Harry speaks publicly, remains unclear. But Seth Meyers will never again be just the host who sat behind the desk that night. He is now an unwitting co-author of a royal unraveling. A man who watched a bomb drop and didn't flinch fast enough. A man whose silence may have cost someone everything. The moment Pete Davidson's words reverberated across the late-night set and exploded into the public consciousness, Meghan Markle's world tilted off its axis. In the blink of an eye, everything she had worked to build, every narrative carefully crafted, every brand polished to precision, every relationship molded to fit her evolving public image, began to crack. It wasn't just a salacious claim. It wasn't a silly Hollywood rumor. This was an accusation made live on air, before millions of viewers, by a man with nothing to lose and every incentive to tell the truth, or at least his version of it. And for Meghan, the problem wasn't just what he said. It was what she hadn't said. Because now, the world wasn't just questioning Pete Davidson's motivations. It was questioning hers. Sources close to Meghan say the panic began within minutes of the segment airing. An aide stationed in Montecito reported that Meghan was watching television when the phone began ringing. First her publicist, then a friend from London, then a panicked text from an Archewell board member asking if it was true. According to that aide, Meghan froze. Not in confusion, but in recognition, like someone whose worst fear had just materialized, and there was no putting it back in the box. She immediately shut off her phone and left the room, instructing the house staff not to disturb her. For 2 hours, she remained in her private quarters, blinds drawn, in complete silence. When she finally emerged, she was pale, her expression unreadable, and she issued one short directive. Call everyone. Now, what followed was a flurry of behind-the-scenes chaos, a calculated attempt to contain what was quickly becoming a runaway inferno. Her crisis PR team was activated. Legal counsel was looped in. Phone calls to NBC executives were made, demanding clarification on whether Pete's statement had been approved in advance. The team debated whether to issue a strongly worded public denial, pursue a retraction, or threaten legal action. But the problem was much bigger than that. There was no clear path forward, because Meghan had never told Harry about Pete. Not entirely. Sure, he knew of her Hollywood days. He'd seen the Instagram posts from before they met. He knew she had a dating history. But Pete Davidson, a name as recognizable as his own, as controversial, as public, had never been part of that conversation. And now, thanks to a few unscripted words, he was the centerpiece of it. In the hours following the interview, Meghan reportedly held a series of frantic video calls with her inner circle, the few people who had been there during her transitional years, who could help her piece together a strategy. One of her closest friends, a former stylist who had traveled with her during her Suits days, was brutally honest. "You should have told him," the friend said, according to a source with direct knowledge of the call. "You should have told Harry about Pete. If he hears it from the public, it's betrayal." Meghan reportedly broke down. She denied that anything had happened between her and Pete during her relationship with Harry. She insisted it was a fling, a short-lived thing, years ago. But even as she defended herself, her voice reportedly cracked with panic. Because in this moment, it didn't matter whether the relationship overlapped. What mattered was that it had never been disclosed. And now, the truth, or something that looked and sounded enough like the truth, was public. Back in Montecito, Meghan's team was spinning. A private statement was drafted and then scrapped. A social media response was considered, then rejected. At one point, there was even talk of filing a temporary restraining order against Pete, not because he was a threat, but because it might publicly position Meghan as the victim of harassment. But even that strategy was deemed too risky. Ultimately, Meghan's team did what they always do when crisis strikes. They retreated. They scrubbed upcoming press appearances. They postponed scheduled social media launches. Her Archetypes podcast episode for that week was quietly delayed. All official communications were frozen. One member of her team reportedly said, "We wait. We don't feed the fire. If we say anything now, it validates him. If we say nothing, we leave room for doubt." But Meghan wasn't so sure. According to one source, she grew increasingly anxious as the silence stretched. She feared the narrative was slipping away from her, that Pete's confession had become too sticky, too viral, too potent to ignore. She considered calling him. Yes, you read that right. In the middle of the maelstrom, Meghan allegedly asked if reaching out to Pete directly might fix things, might allow her to plead her case, convince him to clarify or downplay his comments. Her team was horrified. "Absolutely not," one PR executive reportedly said. "The last thing we need is Pete recording that call and leaking it. This isn't someone who plays by the rules. He went rogue once. He'll do it again." And so Meghan remained silent, outwardly. But inside, she was spiraling. Multiple staffers noted that she appeared visibly distressed in the days that followed. Not hysterical, but haunted. The way someone looks when their version of reality begins to collapse. She took long walks on the property, alone. She asked to be left undisturbed for hours at a time. She reportedly cried during a closed-door meeting with a trusted advisor. But the most chilling moment came, according to one housekeeper, when Meghan was overheard whispering to herself in the garden. "He wasn't supposed to say anything," she murmured. "Not like that. Not now." That sentence, that quiet fragment of speech, revealed more than any press statement ever could. It confirmed one thing above all else. Pete's story, in some shape or form, was real. Maybe not every detail. Maybe not exactly as he framed it. But something had happened between them. Something Meghan never intended to see the light of day. And now it was out. Raw. Uncontrollable. The panic was no longer just about public perception. It was about personal consequences. About the silence coming from Harry. About the way their shared life might now fracture under pressure. Because Harry wasn't speaking to her in the same way. He was present, yes, physically, but emotionally, Meghan could feel the distance growing. She reportedly asked him several times, "Do you believe me?" And he didn't answer right away. The worst part wasn't the headlines. It was the doubt in her husband's eyes. Meghan had built a brand on authenticity, on vulnerability, on being misunderstood but ultimately good-hearted. Now, she was facing a truth she couldn't spin, a past relationship with a man whose fame, volatility, and unapologetic honesty made him impossible to contain. Pete had blown open the gates, and Meghan was scrambling to hold the fortress together. There's a certain irony to the moment. For years, she'd accused the British media of character assassination, and rightly so. But now, it wasn't a tabloid that threatened her reputation. It was a man she once trusted, a man who had nothing left to lose. And as the hours turned into days, and the story refused to die, Meghan faced the most terrifying realization of all. No matter how carefully you build a palace, it only takes one unguarded truth to turn it into ruins. Hollywood is a town built on alliances, ever-shifting, often silent, and always strategic. Public friendships aren't just forged through laughter and shared values. They're negotiated over contracts, brand deals, and optics. In an industry obsessed with image, where silence can speak louder than words and a single comment can end a career, how Meghan Markle's circle would respond to Pete Davidson's bombshell quickly became the next looming question. And the answers, or the absence of them, were as revealing as the scandal itself. In the days following Pete's on-air confession, Hollywood began to stir. At first, the entertainment industry seemed to hold its breath. Meghan's core allies, the Oprah Winfreys, the Serena Williamses, the Tyler Perrys, maintained an eerie quiet. No public support, no reposts, not even a single vague "stay strong" quote in their usual go-to outlets. For someone who had once been propped up as the emblem of modern, misunderstood womanhood, the silence from her so-called friends was deafening. Then came the subtle distancing. Meghan had long surrounded herself with high-profile allies, powerful women who represented independence, grace, and influence. But following Pete's interview, that very circle appeared to fracture. Insiders close to Meghan's camp claimed that phone calls went unanswered. Texts were left on read. Collaborations, once bubbling with energy, suddenly stalled. An executive at a streaming service Meghan had been in talks with for an exclusive deal reportedly said, "We love her. But right now, the optics are messy. We need clarity before we move forward." Even more startling were the social media patterns. In the past, whenever Meghan faced a media storm, a wave of celebrities would rally online with likes, comments, and public posts of support. This time, the opposite happened. Meghan's usual base, actresses, influencers, wellness experts, fell silent. Some even quietly unfollowed her on Instagram. One PR expert noted that within 72 hours of the scandal breaking, Meghan lost a notable number of verified followers, including one or two A-listers who had once vocally defended her. The message was clear. The scandal had changed the equation. In the new Hollywood, where image is currency and association is everything, being linked too closely to a woman accused, even vaguely, of infidelity within a royal marriage was a liability. Especially when the accuser was Pete Davidson, a man known for brutal honesty and zero filter, whose words carry the weight of both humor and raw truth. And Pete? He wasn't done. Days after the initial interview, he appeared on a podcast, unplanned, unscheduled, and allegedly off the cuff. When asked if he wanted to clarify his comments, he simply said, "Nah, I said what I said. If you know, you know." The hosts laughed nervously. But then Pete added something that shook the industry. "I'm not the one who lied. I'm not the one who got married with secrets." That single statement opened the floodgates. Suddenly, Hollywood insiders began whispering. People who'd worked with Meghan in the past started sharing stories anonymously. One former publicist claimed Meghan had a selective memory about her dating history. Another stylist said she often deleted old texts and emails before transitioning into the royal phase of her life. A third source, close to an elite modeling agency, suggested Meghan once asked to have certain names removed from casting sheets, names she claimed didn't fit the brand anymore. Whether any of these stories were true didn't matter. In Hollywood, perception is reality, and Meghan's perception was beginning to shift. But perhaps the most painful betrayal came not from anonymous whispers, but from someone she once called a friend, Ariana Grande. Ariana had her own history with Pete. Their engagement, breakup, and public fallout had been documented in real time across every tabloid and late-night monologue. But after Pete's revelation about Meghan, Ariana posted a cryptic Instagram story that sent the internet into a frenzy. The post was simple, a black screen with white text that read, "Men don't lie about women they used to love. They lie for them." Within seconds, fans began speculating that the message was about Pete, and indirectly, Meghan. Ariana deleted the post within 20 minutes, but not before millions saw it. Screenshots exploded across X, TikTok, and Reddit. The interpretations varied, but the damage was done. Ariana, knowingly or not, had added fuel to the fire and hinted that Pete's version of events was more credible than Meghan's silence. More betrayal followed. A well-known fashion designer who had collaborated with Meghan for a charity capsule line gave a sharp interview to a European magazine. When asked about the scandal, she replied, "You can only wear a mask for so long. Eventually, it cracks." Even Kim Kardashian, who had long kept her distance from the Meghan drama, was pulled into the narrative. Paparazzi caught her leaving a restaurant when a reporter asked if she believed Pete. Her response was short, but telling, "I believe Pete always speaks his truth." She didn't need to say Meghan's name. The message was received. As the fallout continued, Meghan's defenders scrambled to reframe the narrative. Some argued that Hollywood's response was hypocritical, that the same industry now backing Pete had once vilified him. Others claimed it was misogyny in disguise, punishing a woman for her past while excusing a man's transparency. But the louder the defenses grew, the quieter Meghan's allies became. Even Tyler Perry, once her fiercest champion and provider of sanctuary during her royal exit, gave a puzzling response during a promotional event. When asked about the scandal, he smiled thinly and said, "Some truths belong behind closed doors." Unfortunately, not everyone understands that. No one needed a translation. Meghan wasn't just losing public favor. She was losing the quiet support of the very people who had once protected her. And in Hollywood, that's a death knell. Because reputations in the industry are built not only on talent or likability, but on trust. The kind of trust that whispers to casting directors, investors, and fellow artists, "She's good for it. She's solid. She won't bring baggage." Pete Davidson's revelation, whether exaggerated or understated, shattered that whisper. Now, Meghan was a risk, a question mark, and no one in the image-obsessed world of Hollywood wants to invest in uncertainty. For a woman who had spent years meticulously shedding her old image and rebranding herself as a duchess, philanthropist, and producer, the scandal was more than a personal crisis. It was a professional derailment. Every silence, every unfollow, every cryptic quote or Instagram story. They weren't just gossip, they were warning signs. Red flags raised by a community that thrives on loyalty but disappears at the first scent of betrayal. As Meghan watched her support system dissolve around her, one truth began to emerge. Chilling, painful, and unshakable. In Hollywood, there are no permanent friends, only permanent consequences. When chaos breaks out in the modern media world, it's not uncommon for celebrities, influencers, or public figures to rush to their platforms to defend, deny, or deflect. Tweets are fired, Instagram stories are posted, publicists scramble to shape the narrative before it spins out of control. But Buckingham Palace plays by a very different rulebook. They don't react. They wait. And when they do speak, it's never emotional. It's calculated, terse, a line or two crafted in centuries-old tradition. One part diplomacy, one part quiet intimidation. So, when Pete Davidson's confession shook the very pillars of the Sussex image and thrust Meghan Markle into yet another media hurricane, all eyes turned toward the British royal establishment. Would the palace address it? Would King Charles speak? Would Prince William, now heir to the throne and widely considered the new face of the firm, release a statement in defense or disdain? What followed was perhaps even more powerful than words.